welcome back to the Sarai Show. Today I had my work evaluation and it took everything in me not to shut down. As a veteran navigating PTSD, anxiety, and the private sector, these moments hit very differently. So in this episode, I really want to break down what it's really like to go through a civilian performance review after years of EPRs or OPRs, which are the annual evaluations in the military that would either break or make your career. And I'll share what I wish I knew before transitioning, how I prepare now, and why these evaluations feel so heavy for some veterans. If you've ever sat in a work evaluation silently panicking, not because you didn't do your job, but because you didn't know how to explain something you felt could be misunderstood or something that could have looked a little odd, that probably never needed to be explained in the first place, you are not alone. So, like I said, today was my evaluation. I'm a disabled veteran with PTSD, anxiety, and depression, but it's the anxiety that I struggle with the most. And on days like today, I feel like I'm carrying more than just performance review concerns. I feel like I'm carrying my past, my military, my trauma, and all the ways I've been taught to shrink myself to survive. So today, this is for every veteran who's ever felt like their old world didn't prepare them for this new one. So let's start with the truth. I did not sleep very well last night. I tossed and turned, replaying everything I might get asked, wondering if I'd say too much or not enough, wondering if my anxiety would come across as unpreparedness or just being a weirdo, wondering if my tone would sound too defensive, which is something that happens to me sometimes when I'm anxious, even when I was just trying to be honest in a professional manner. Because here's what many people don't understand: PTSD does not clock out when you clock in. No mental illness does that. Anxiety doesn't take a break just because I need to focus on my review. In fact, it almost feels like it's competing for attention. I had to mentally rehearse how I would speak, how I would breathe, what I would say when my voice started shaking. This wasn't about feedback. This felt like a test of, do I still belong here? Can I survive this world I never trained for? But I went with it. I had no choice, right? You have to do these things. And I actually did better than I thought because I prepared, not just professionally, but emotionally. And, emotionally, mentally, whatever you want to call it. But it's almost as important when you have a psychological disorder. Your coping skills become just as important as your job specific skills in order to maintain a career and develop professionally just like everybody else. Let's talk about this massive shift we go through as veterans. In the military, we had the EPR or the OPR, depending on whether you were enlisted or an officer, and that stands for enlisted performance report or officer performance report, or whatever the equivalent, depending on your branch. It was structured, it was standardized and consistent, objective, even some would say. And honestly, you kind of knew how to game the system if you played your cards right. And a lot of us could somewhat predict what to expect because of the strong emphasis of the importance of the EPR or the OPR throughout the whole year. You had bullets, You had checklists, mission statements, and quantifiable achievements. It was a lot of numbers, it was rank, it was clear. In the private sector, though, you get the soft skills, vague feedback, shifting expectations, and sometimes even managers who may or may not have any leadership skills or understand how trauma shows up at work. No one teaches you how to talk about your wins without sounding like you're bragging. No one tells you it's okay to ask for accommodations. And worst of all, no one explains how to self advocate without over explaining or underplaying or apologizing for existing. So here's what I wish someone had told me before I entered the civilian workforce. Number one, your work will speak, but only if you do. So in the military, we got used to being evaluated on paper, your work ethic, your deployment history, your role. But in the private sector, if you don't vocalize your efforts, it can easily go unnoticed, especially as veterans, and especially if you're not the loudest voice in the room. I think as vets, we assume everyone else is a hard worker and it shouldn't be something to brag about or have to even talk about because, well, in a military environment, it would probably go like this. Oh, yeah? Oh, you work hard? What do you want, a trophy for that? I mean, we all work hard. That's why we're all here. Number two, civilian supervisors don't always understand trauma language. And I guess a little bit of this does happen in the military world as well. If you say, I have PTSD or I have anxiety, some might hear, I am a liability. That's the sad truth. So I've learned to translate some of those with I work well with structure. I prefer very clear expectations. I thrive in high pressure situations, but I also need a space to recharge. Number three, imposter syndrome doesn't mean you don't belong. It means you care. I used to think doubt meant I wasn't ready until I realized that I was never going to be ready for anything ever. Now I know it's a signal to just slow down, breathe, and remember you earned your seat at the table. You're fine. Number four, it's okay to bring your story into the room, but only if you're ready. So, obviously, don't do this with trauma if you're addressing it for the first time. You don't owe your trauma to anyone. But if your truth helps reframe how you want to be seen, but most importantly, how you want to see yourself, use it. But use it strategically. I've learned to say things like, my background taught me how to adapt quickly, manage stress, and lead under pressure. I also have to balance that with mental health strategies I'm proud to have developed, or something like that. So it becomes more of an empowerment than a burden. And so this is how I prepared, not just for this evaluation, but for my mental health in general, anytime I'm going to do something that stresses me out. So I reviewed my own wins before anyone else did. I sat down with a notebook and asked, what am I proud of this quarter? When did I show leadership skills? When did I ask for help and grow from it? And it's good. It's good to ask yourself those questions and be proud of it. I practice talking about my challenges, but with strength. So, for example, this year I focused a lot on creating systems to stay consistent throughout mental health challenges. And I've seen real improvement, which is a true story. I also wrote a script, not to read, but to ground myself because when anxiety kicks in, it's easy to forget what you already know. And you don't want to show that side to your boss. And I just absolutely hate that. I hate that. But having key phrases ready made all the difference so that if I suddenly felt self conscious, it buys me some time to compose myself and proceed without anybody noticing. So I also told myself this meeting is a conversation, not a courtroom. You are not on trial. You are a professional navigating life while doing your best, and that deserves respect. So, how did it go? Well, it went way better than I expected. Oftentimes, that's how it goes. There were a few moments where I felt a little misunderstood, but, just taking the time to clarify things. And then there were moments where I just felt seen. And honestly, my supervisor is not an intimidating guy at all. He is probably the most understanding and kind person I've ever worked for. So I know a lot of this is just in my head, but that's what a lot of mental health challenges are, right? Just strong reactions that can be inappropriate for the situation, and you cannot always help them or stop them. But when you gain the coping skills to do so, it helps your confidence to do it as much as you can. Now, it wasn't perfect, but I left my meeting feeling like I had finally shown up as me, the veteran, the woman, the survivor, the professional. Not hiding, not minimizing, not apologizing. So if you're heading into your own evaluation, especially as a veteran or simply someone who is navigating trauma or other invisible wounds, please hear me. You are not broken. You are not too much. You are not falling behind. You are rebuilding in a world that doesn't always know what you've been through. And still, you're showing up. So walk into that room. Walk into that room with your head held high, not because you've healed everything, but because you're still here. You're still growing. You're still fighting for the life you deserve. And if nobody else tells you this today, I will. You're doing great. If you're trying your best, you're doing great. That is it. I will see you guys on the next episode.